Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to those of us joining here today for our Ask Set Anything Shared Services edition. There's been a lot of interest in this particular session. I see we're at looks like 276 or so and climbing here in the Zoom room, and we're really pleased to have so many people joining us both in Zoom as well as on live stream. I'd like to first begin with our treaty acknowledgement today. University of Alberta acknowledges that we are located on Treaty 6 territory and respects the histories, languages, and cultures of First Nations, Métis, Inuit, and all First Peoples of Canada, whose presence continues to enrich our vibrant communities. I'd like to just start this morning with a bit of background, and then we're going to fairly quickly move into question period. Just a little bit of stage setting. We've talked about this before, but collectively, we need to continue to do more to be more efficient and responsive to the changing needs of our institution, while better designing our administrative structures so that we can continue to support our core teaching and research mission at the University of Alberta. While the new operating model that we'll talk more about today will ensure that we can operate efficiently and effectively within our new budget reality, a very important goal for us is to also create a vibrant and healthy working environment that provides staff with meaningful work, engaging experiences, and fulfilling career paths. I'd like to recognize and acknowledge that we're all experiencing different and often difficult emotions during this time, but I want to reassure you that your feelings matter. The university has many resources to support us through this period of change, and I would please refer you to the faculty and staff section on the University of Alberta webpage for resources, as well as how to access this information. Please reach out if you need help. We recognize that the changes being made by implementing the new model are significant and affect each of you. You all make valuable contributions to the success of our university, and we want to create structures in which you can continue your great work. I suspect that some of you have questions about what this restructuring means for your own positions, what moving to the center means, and your career growth opportunities within this new model. Throughout the process of implementing our model, we commit to continuing to share timely, transparent, and truthful information about the plan and the steps that we're taking. It's important to know, however, that not all the answers are known yet. We will, however, share what we can today and answer as many questions of yours that we can. This is the first of what will be ongoing regular Ask Set Anything Shared Services editions. In addition, we'll continue to share information on our UAT website as it becomes available, as well as on the Shared Services work stream webpage. My name's Todd Gilchrist. I'm the Vice President of University Services and Finance, and I'll be acting as moderator for today's session. To help answer your questions relating to shared services, we have brought together a panel consisting of members of the Service Excellence Transformation, or SET project team. I'd like to now take a few minutes to introduce everyone. We will start with Rob Munro, Executive Lead, Service Excellence Transformation. Brian Stewart, Program Director, Administrative Transformation, Service Excellence Transformation Team. We have Hamish Stein, Project Manager, Shared Services Functional Review Stream with SET. Cheryl Earle, Shared Services Initiative Lead with SET. And Annette McPherson, HR Specialist, Service Excellence Transformation. And last but not least, we have Leanne Klein, Change Management Specialist, Shared Services, Functional Review Stream with SET. Grant, I'll ask you to please put up the first slide. We're focused today on shared services, which is a key component of our new operating model. The U of A shared services function comprises three distinct elements that operate together to deliver efficient and effective service for users. It's comprised of the Staff Service Center, our Transaction Processing Hub, and our Continuous Improvement Team. Our Shared Services Unit is modeled on best practice examples from academic institutions in Canada, the United States, the UK, and Australia, but also offer that it's a model that is used in many other industries with great success. This first slide shows the overall operating model and how shared services will consolidate our transactional activities and processes from across the university into one common service organization. This allows for single points of accountability, minimizes duplication, maximizes service consistency, and generates the greatest opportunities for continuous improvement across the university. In doing so, shared services will free up institutional time and resources to perform more strategic activities relating to the university's core mission of teaching and research. Just so everybody knows, the slides that we're using today will be posted on the SET website within the next week. There's also a shared services briefing note that is a great source of information and will provide an overview of what's happening, current activities, and the proposed approach for the shared services workstream. You should have received, if you registered, this briefing note was shared by email earlier this week with those that did register. It's also been posted on the event page and shared services page for anyone else who is interested. I'd like to now turn things over to Cheryl to make a few opening comments, and then we'll get fairly quickly into our question and answer period. Cheryl, over to you.
Thanks, Todd, and good afternoon, everyone. Given the tremendous interest and the number of people we have on the line today, I'm going to keep my opening remarks very brief so we can get to as many questions as possible. As many of you know, we've been working with, the shared services team has been working with the SET functional stream since last fall on what shared services could look like at the U of A. At this stage, we've been using the information that's been gathered by the functional streams during the discovery stages, and we've got a good understanding of HR, finance, and IT in the areas that discovery has been completed. And I think we have a good idea of how we can effectively deliver some of those services through the shared services model. As you can see from this slide, it's not just HR, finance, and IT. It's also, we expect over the next 2 years that we'll be able to bring in services from all of the other key administrative portfolios across the institution and expand the scope of shared services. Thanks. As Todd mentioned, there's 3 distinct elements of shared services, the largest being the transaction processing unit, which will take on the responsibility for the more routine, high volume transactional activity that's currently performed at the faculties and the units. One of the things that's really important to understand, and a big component of what we're working on right now, is that in order to deliver these services with the significantly less staff that will be here at the university, we do need to redesign and standardize these processes, which is the focus of a lot of the work that the team is starting to get underway now. The Staff Service Center is the primary point of contact to access these services and to get information. So this is not intended to be a situation where there always has to be a call to the Staff Service Center to get service. Many of them will be facilitated through automated workflows and other technology, but it will be the primary kind of front door to access our services. And then both of these units will be supported by the continuous improvement unit that will support the initial process design. And then as shared services evolve, they'll be a key component of helping with the improvement and the evolution of those services, and as well ensuring that we focus on that customer service culture that we want to build. And shared services will be accountable really for delivering services that meet established service level agreements, and that's a key component of continuous improvement. They'll actually be monitoring and measuring and producing key performance metrics that we'll be able to use to be transparent about the level of service that we're providing, and also identify those opportunities where we need to continue to improve the work that we do. It's important to understand that as we're building this out, the transition to a shared services model is a journey. It takes time, but we're committed to its success, and we do believe that it'll deliver cost-effective and high-quality services as time progresses and as the years go on. So Todd, I'll go back to you and we can get things underway.
Excellent. Thank you, Cheryl. Appreciate that. So we will get started with our discussion, and I'm pleased to welcome Nicole Liszewski from Faculty of Engineering to today's session. We've started a bit of a tradition with these where we ask somebody to get us going, get the juices flowing, and Nicole has volunteered to ask our first question today. So thank you very much, Nicole, for joining us, and I'll turn it over to you.
Hi, Todd. Thank you very much for this opportunity to share a question in this Ask Anything Set session. Engineering service teams have come together to create a common question that is on our minds. Right now, we're experiencing some uncertainty in terms of whether we should be taking advantage of and applying for central opportunities as they arise in view of the lack of information regarding some positions that may be at the faculty level. Some individuals might regret taking an opportunity elsewhere only to discover that if they have waited, the faculty opportunities would have been available and maybe more in line with their career aspirations. Kind of like, for example, like if you go to a buffet and you're not too sure what the main dishes are at the end, but there's some really great looking salads, you overfill your plate, you get to the end and you're disappointed so you don't have room for those other items that you would have preferred. So basically our overall question is, with the lack of knowing about all the positions at one time and what we want to make a wise career and fiscal decision, what can you share with us so that we have the information required to make these critical decisions?
Thanks, Nicole. Great question and great analogy with the buffet. I, for one, have never been known to overfill my plate with salad, but I get the point. At this stage, I'll say unfortunately, we don't have a complete answer to that question, and not all the functional streams are going to be the same as we move through. But the intent of the new operating model is certainly to reduce the administrative work performed in the faculty's units portfolios, right, and move them into the central operating model to allow faculties to focus their time and attention on activities that directly support that core mission of teaching and research that I've referred to a couple times already today. I can say that specifically for HR and finance, we are working on the assumption that the majority of the processes will be performed by shared services or maybe otherwise as part of the business partner responsibilities. And so as such, we don't anticipate any significant full-time roles remaining in the faculties as part of the process as we move through. As part of the overall process redesign work, we will involve representatives from the end-to-end processes in the discussion to ensure that we understand that process from all points of view, and that we're able to validate our assumptions before the changes are made. While there has been reference in some materials to the 15% remaining in the faculties or colleges, this is intended to represent called the allocation of activity rather than specific people or roles. And it would be anticipated that much of that activity would be represented by the participation of more generalist type roles, say college GM, faculty GM, administrative support personnel, in working within that process. I can add also that the service catalogs for HR, finance, and IT are going to be published in the next week or so. And they do provide a high level, but a bit better of a breakdown of where services are expected to be delivered in the new operating model. The service catalogs aren't intended to define the roles, but as processes are redesigned, those roles are identified to be performed by shared services. Then they'll be published on the position opportunity posting board, the POP. And the POP is intended to give all staff, some foresight and information about the upcoming opportunities, so they can have access as soon as it's known. And it's certainly our hope that this will help enable staff to make informed choices and pursue the career aspirations that they may have. Nicole, thank you so much for getting us started today. I'd now like to open up for questions from others. Please raise your virtual hand. We're going to try to answer as many questions as we possibly can in our time together today. I think everybody's probably aware by now. It was probably a month or so ago, Zoom changed where you find your hand. It's now under the reactions button, and you should be able to raise a virtual hand. So let's see some hands. We've got some. Sydney.
Hi, thank you. Oh, sorry, I'm assuming I can go.
Yes, you can.
Okay, perfect.
Take it away.
So I work at Augustana, and so you know that we're an hour and 15 minutes southeast of Edmonton. So as you're talking about these positions of opportunity, my question is, are Augustana staff going to be equally considered for these roles despite their distance? I feel there's a way, especially we've been working from home for a year now. There's already built-in ways for us to work from a distance if possible. So would really like that to be considered. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Sydney. That's a great point. I just want to acknowledge what you've said about what COVID has taught us all, right? There's few good things, I'll say, maybe that have come out of COVID, but one is what I've referred to on a couple of occasions as this societal experiment that does indicate that we can successfully do things remotely that we maybe would have not otherwise thought that we could. Beyond that, I don't know that there's 100% answer to your question yet. I'm gonna turn it over to probably a combination of Rob and Cheryl, but I will say that we are looking at ways that the shared services center, that staff from there can at the very least work some rotational type schedules that would allow for some at home and in the office work. But to be honest, I'm not sure that anybody has fully contemplated your exact question. So Rob or Cheryl, which one of you would like to start? Rob?
Yeah, I can add on. So as Todd mentioned, and as you mentioned in your question itself, of course, we've learned an awful lot with technology through this whole COVID period of time, and we are definitely looking to leverage that piece. The other piece I would mention specifically with Augustana, and I know that Todd did mention that we don't anticipate that there's going to be full-time roles in many of the different functions, such as FR or finance and HR, sorry. But there are partner roles available as well. So the partner roles do respond back to the centers, but will be embedded in different areas. So Augustana will be supported in that method as well. So there will be opportunities for people to be based in Augustana in those type of roles as well. Cheryl, is there anything else you'd want to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think in all honesty, Sydney, we actually hadn't contemplated it to that degree, but one of the things that we do think is important when you're building a new organization is to try and get people as co-located as much as possible, so that we can build that culture, build that team. Now, that being said, I would not want to disadvantage staff because of the fact that they are located at Augustana campus. You're a part of the campus community and the university, and we have to consider you, in my opinion, the same as we would any other candidate, and we have to find a way to make that model work for all of us. So I certainly would hope that we don't make decisions that would exclude the possibility for staff at Augustana to participate fully in shared services.
Thanks, Sydney, Rob, Cheryl. Barbara Baker.
Thank you very much. So thank you for this opportunity. It's really great to see that we've gotten almost 400 participants out to this talk. So that's awesome. It's kind of a two-question thing. One, I kind of want to get an understanding of what is the difference between the lean versus business mapping. Is one just another chapter model of the other, or like what is the difference? Because lean is really, you know, as it's defined, is that systematic approach to identifying and eliminating waste and increasing a value added activity. Whereas same with the business mapping, it is about just making sure that you're not handling that product 6 times, you're trying to get it down to you're handling that product once. The other thing that I'd like to know in relation to the lean is I know there's a lot of training and video and opportunities that are being rolled out, but some of it is not getting out to the whole entire community. I'm wondering if there's some type of vehicle whereas these types of training where you get the modules on lean, you get anything else that might be coming out that you can actually start to get the buy-in from the employees, because these are the people that actually are going to be making those recommendations. So the more training you get out to the staff who are going to be doing the jobs, the more buy-in that you're going to get into the process. Thank you.
Thanks, Barbara. Great questions and great points. Want to emphasize, you know, the need for buy-in, and so we're hopeful that even days like today, right, help to foster that greater involvement, better communication, and of course, there's more to come. I am going to ask Rob if he wants to start with this one, and suspect potentially Brian and Hamish might have something to add as well.
Yeah, so the specific questions around some of the different tools, process mapping and lean. There are a number of tools that are out there in the different marketplaces, and how you can do evaluations of your systems to ultimately make them more efficient and effective. So when we're talking about lean and process mapping, those are complementary type of activities, and there are well-established tools that we can use. And the whole nature of it is just to make sure that we understand first the nature of the process as exists, and then how we can improve those processes going forward. So those are just some of the tools that are available to us, and we do have individuals within our teams that have different areas of training within those specific areas. With respect to the involvement, we are, as we're starting to do the process evaluation, the process mapping, we are getting teams together to be part of those processes, making sure that we have good subject matter expertise so that they help us improve those processes as we're moving forward. We are also looking at some different areas of training, and we're just starting into developing some of those processes as well, some onboarding type of processes, training around our service culture, because that's an extremely important piece of the entire SET initiative. So we're just starting to do some of those processes as well, but it is an excellent point that we do need to make sure that we have that level of involvement, because ultimately that is going to be a mechanism towards our success. Turn it over to Cheryl or Brian if they have additional comments.
I'll just say a few things, and Leanne may want to pipe in here as well. She's been doing some work in this space, and as a lean exponent, so she's got much more expertise than certainly I have in this realm. In terms of, just to build on what Rob said, it's pretty much they are complementary. In fact, you can see process mapping as an element of leaning in terms of the whole scheme of things. Lean is more dynamic. It's ongoing. It's constantly reevaluating what you're doing. Getting feedback from the users, getting feedback from those that are providing the service to constantly improve it. Process mapping tends to take it's more sporadic, it's more done at a point in time. So they're very similar, and they're components of each other, but essentially the lean is a more ongoing dynamic process, whereas process mapping is a more sporadic process. Leanne, you may want to build on that.
Yeah, and one of the other things with lean is that you focus very much on the voice of the customer. So the people who are receiving that service and the value that service provides them. So that's another sort of component of lean that's focused on quite a bit. With respect to the second part of your question, we are working with the communications team to share those training modules out more broadly and have them posted on our webpage as well. So then anybody can have access and take a look and view them.
Thank you. And it would be my understanding that we do have a plan to roll out the training widely. I was going to say widely. Hopefully our rollout won't be wild. Thank you very much, Barbara and team, for the answer. Just encourage everybody, if you've got something on your mind, now's the time to ask the question, make the comment. So raise your hand. We will go next to Jillian, please.
I'd actually like to circle back to my colleague in engineering's first question about the timeline for posting of those central positions versus the ones in the faculty. Because I didn't really hear you speak to the student services side of that. Can you talk about that timeline?
Yeah, I'll ask maybe Brian or Cheryl to get into the detail. You might recall, Jillian, the slide, I think it was the first slide that was up when Cheryl was up in it. You saw that HR, finance, IT were sort of the leading three, and then the other three lagged a bit. But Brian, can you give some more specifics on student services, please?
In terms of student services, as Todd was just saying there, and as was shown in the graph earlier, there's a flow to what we're doing, and we focused on essentially the back end, the back office functions, as we categorize them as IT, HR, finance, and we're ahead in those areas. And a lot of that work will be drifting into the shared services, and that's what we're working on now between the development of the shared service entities and also in terms of the process redesign. So that's ahead of the work in the other areas, the other set streams, which you may know are student services, research admin, and external engagement. So from that perspective, the student services is still in the process of discovery. And we're just, I don't think we started actually the discovery process yet. I think we're just designing it, and that's going to happen over the next few weeks. In the meantime, we have determined the need for the student service center, and we are going ahead with that, so that we want to take something, campus solutions, and essentially expand it to be much more functional, and also to incorporate a wider scope of student activity. So that's going ahead. But we still haven't got really to the student services and the future state of the future the student services across the institution. So I don't have an answer for you yet, Gillian, as to when those jobs might or might not occur, except that the Student Services Centre, we're aiming for a launch sometime in June on that, and that there will likely be positions in there that will be opening up sometime in the next few months.
Thanks, Brian. It's maybe some of you have maybe heard me say this before, but I'll just repeat it because it might go a little bit to Jillian's question and some of my earlier comments about how we don't have all the answers now or just yet. The SET initiative is following what I refer to as just a more iterative approach from project management, as opposed to what might be considered a more traditional approach. A traditional approach, you conceptualize, you design, you consult, you build, you get your implementation plans already, and then you define go live day, and you flip the switch and go, and everybody knows everything that there is to know on implementation day. The way that the cuts to our Campus Alberta grant came about, and the speed with which they impacted us meant that we had to use this more iterative approach. And so instead of doing all that up front, we do it in an iterative fashion. So we design, we consult, we build, we implement, we design, we consult, we build, we implement. And that's frustrating for some of us, myself included, who would really like to have all the details up front, but it is part of it's the big part of what is behind us not being able to answer questions like this very good one. But we will work to make sure that we do bring people into the know as soon as possible. Kathleen?
I work in HR, and I just have a question about some of the roles in the transaction processing. I'm just curious to find out how you plan to make the roles fulfilling, in that transaction processing can be quite draining. I have keyed 30 plus e-forms in a day for days on end, and it's incredibly draining, and it would be very difficult to have a role where that was your main responsibility. So can you speak to how we can structure those roles to make sure they're doing their best work, but also are fulfilled in their roles?
Great, thank you, Kathleen. I'm gonna probably look to Cheryl maybe to start us on this, and then just from some of my own personal experience with similar operations, I'll maybe add some context as well, Kathleen. But Cheryl, over to you.
Thanks, Kathleen. That's a really great question. And one of the things that I think people assume that when we say transactional, that means, you know, that you're doing data entry, and that's not really what the transactional necessarily is intended to refer to, and that's certainly not what we're looking for in terms of a transaction processing center. One of the things as our process design work is going on, we're really looking at things where you're, you know, just keying and those kinds of things. We're looking at ways that we can automate those processes. We want to look at using workflow tools that's capturing information and data along in a process, such that by the time we get to the point that we want to enter it into, we've captured all of that information, and then it doesn't require us rekeying and entering it as just a form. So we think by doing that, we're actually going to be able to kind of simplify and eliminate a lot of those more routine, mundane, for lack of a better word, tasks, such that then we can actually offer, you know, some of those services where I'm sure there are days that you're doing things where you're being asked your opinion and you're consulting and you're providing a service and an input to the process. And that's really what we want to focus on. So the roles that we're looking to define, are really focusing on providing a service and automating those tasks that really, as we say, are not added value. They have to be done. But if we can simplify them and automate them, then we can focus our energy and time on actually really providing a service. And that's really going to be the focus of what shared services is all about.
Thanks, Cheryl. And Kathleen, I'll just offer a perspective, and it's only a perspective, and it's not to suggest that every one of these operations is the same. But in my most recent world, I was responsible for a large shared services operation that had 2 production centers and a contact center. About 300 people or so between the 2 physical locations, and I was always fascinated with how well those teams meshed together. And it was actually, if you looked at our engagement results, our employee engagement results, that unit consistently overperformed the organization's average on the rest of my portfolio. So, you know, they are environments, I think, that can be very engaging and very rewarding, and that's why it's so important that we get this right, including with the processes, including the setup, including the technology, including the leadership. And so that will be a big focus for us for sure. Thank you, Kathleen. Thank you, Cheryl.
Great, thanks.
Let's go to Sarah, please.
Hi there. I just wanted to follow up on Jillian's question with student services, and just to get some more information around, Brian, you'd mentioned the discovery process. So just, you know, what that looks like, who's involved, and any information you could provide us with that.
So we've been following a pretty standardized process in terms of how we uncover what's happening in the institution. HR has followed it, finance has followed it, research admin is now underway and they're following it, and student services hopefully be underway soon and they'll be following it. And essentially what we're doing is we're trying to understand what activities are done where by who, so that we get a better idea of how the place works. And from that, then we can extract what are core activities, what are we run a priority list of what are the key activities and the key processes that are run in the university, what are the most challenging ones, what are the most important ones. So then when we're looking to move things or to redesign things, we can use that information to prioritize activities. Particularly when you've got a short timeline and you've got to move things very quickly, we have to be able to identify what's the easiest thing, or not necessarily always the easiest thing to move, but what's let's say the most propitious thing to move. What are the most risky things that maybe we don't want to move right yet? So that's what we use. So that process has been used. In terms of who's engaged, we engage quite a lot of SMEs from each of the functional areas to provide data on those. And once we've got the base data and the base discovery, we start to go back to what we call working groups, and they're consisting of individuals, again, from more close to the process areas, and then we ask them to help us in terms of the redesigning of any particular process. This is underway right now in HR, and we're just starting out on that process, HR being the first that we're doing. So as we learn more about this, we'll adapt it as we go, but so far it's actually working out quite well. And it's allowing us to to both understand the institution, but also understand how we can best change the institution. And we do involve those who are actively involved in the processes to make sure that we understand what is and what can be.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Sarah. Carrie, I'm coming to you in just 1 second. I do just want to acknowledge that there is a question in the chat, and apologies for that. We thought the chat functionality was shut off for this meeting. It is now. It's just become, with 500 people or 400 people on a call, it becomes sometimes impossible to monitor and manage. But I will address Catherine Stevens' question in the chat, which is, where will the service center employees be located on campus, positioned on campus? And Brian's right, there's still some final details being determined. But I will tell you that the intention is that this group, along with other service groups at the university, are going to be located at Enterprise Square downtown. And so that building is undergoing a fairly significant reno, and the intention is that I'll refer to it as the service center, and that team will be located down there. So more to come on that. I can't really offer you much more on that today, but as details do become available, we will ensure that they are out in your hands as soon as possible. Carrie, over to you.
I work at the Faculty of Extension. So I apologize. I was having a few problems getting online. But anyways, the question may have already been asked, but I'm wondering, are there more cuts coming to the support staff given the 50% cut that we have to take again, or the hit?
Sure, I can talk a bit about budget, but first of all, I have to say, Carrie, I love how your background intermingles with your shirt. You look otherworldly.
I'm out of this world.
Yeah, you're out of yeah, so just quickly from a budget perspective, if you've been following the news or Bill's posts and so forth since the 25th, the organization was planning in fiscal 2022, which starts April 1st, had been planning for a $53 million cut to our Campus Alberta grant, or 9.7%. The cut came through, or the reduction came through at a greater number, which we had been anticipating. It came through at 11% at a total of $60 million. So that's $7 million more. The $7 million additional reduction will not result in any further job loss. We've been able to account for that money elsewhere within the budget. As we move into fiscal 2022, which from a set perspective is referred to as phase 2, yes, there are still other significant changes that need to occur. The organization is still needing to find about another $30 million, which equates to somewhere in the neighborhood of 350 to 400 FTE. And so those changes will, I'll say, unfortunately, continue to impact our organization. At the same time, as we move through transition, we will also see approximately another 350 to 400 FTE moving from I'll just refer to it as the decentralized organization into the new centralized service model. So the coming year holds lots of activity in this area. So it's a good question. Thank you, Carrie. Hopefully that answers it.
Yes, thank you.
Susan Babcock.
Hi, Todd, and thank you very much. My question, I want to shift the focus a little bit. Not surprisingly, people know I work in the VPRI portfolio, and I want just sort of a clarification and then a question. And the clarification is, when we talk about staff services center, we're talking about all staff, because in other venues, when we talk about staff, we're talking about everybody except tenured colleagues. And so I just want to, so staff services center is for all staff. I'm assuming it is.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about how SET and academic restructuring are going to converge, particularly with respect to research administration. So I'm quite curious, for instance, about how research administration services might be reflected in the staff services center. And because students also need to access research admin services, right? So just if you could talk a little bit about that, that'd be great. Thanks.
Yeah, for sure. So so I'm going to talk very little about it, and then I'm going to turn it over to Rob and Brian. I will say that that might be one of those areas, Susan, where we still have more to learn as we move through that research work stream, the research admin work stream. It's one of the ones that, if I remember correctly, is fairly early in its discovery process phase. I can say to your first question, yes, what we call shared services now, that's our brand for it, or our name for it, includes the service center and transaction hub. And so on the service center component, that's all staff, all faculty staff, if you will. The student service center will be in a separate location, but the transaction hub portion of shared services will do transactions for staff and students. Rob or Brian, who would like to comment on the research piece?
Yeah, okay, and Cheryl may want to pipe in here too, because she's obviously closer to it than I am. In terms of it, Susan, essentially what we want to do with, at least on the transaction processing hub, is to look at those workloads that make sense to bring in because they got scale and they got mass, and they can be, there's economies of scale, or there's economies of automation or robotization of those, and we're looking at those all over the place. So obviously we're starting with finance and HR because, as we said, that seemed most logical to us. But as we get into the more academic realm, we have to understand how those are done, because while finance and HR tend to be more centralized, tend to be standardized, I wouldn't say they are, but tend towards it. The more you get to the academic, the less standardization you have. So the longer it'll be to try and ascertain what those economies of scale might be and what workloads can be brought into the center. But let's say on a philosophical or conceptual level, we do want to look for those, and we would like to bring those in ultimately, because that's to the benefit of all. If we're spending even trust dollars on administration or transaction activities that don't benefit much, and we could take those dollars and use them to be more focused on the research itself, then it would behoove us to do that. So while it's not in our first tranche, it's definitely on our horizon to look at those as time goes by. Cheryl, is there anything to that?
I think the only thing I would add is the perspective of, like, the research admin stream is really just getting underway. They've just launched their discovery. So although there was some things identified during the kind of the service catalog development stage that there were things that could potentially transition in, we use discovery to confirm whether or not that makes sense and the information's there. One of the things that we have started to note, though, that there are some things that are maybe really HR or finance that, because they're done for researchers, are sometimes referred to as research admin. So we're really trying to understand what are the core basic things that are common and can be common regardless of who the service is delivered to, separate from the things that are really unique to research and supporting a research in that endeavor. So that's the only thing is, and it's still early stages, Susan, and we're working our way through that.
Thank you, Susan, Brian, and Cheryl. On to Brett, please.
Hi, Todd. Thanks so much. Appreciate this opportunity to chat today. This is great. We've discussed a number of critical elements related to process, systems, consistency, efficiency, automation versus what's in person, views of processes, and so forth for the experience that we want with shared services. With that, I recall a quote I previously came across from Gallup, where they said, if you do not make an emotional connection with customers, then satisfaction is worthless. And so with that in mind, can you just share with me a bit more about the feeling and emotion we're aiming for through the shared services? What does that look like? What does that feel like beyond these technical components? What are we shooting for there? And what does that mean for the largest campus community, and how can we leverage that for staff engagement, morale, and pride at the university?
Yeah, thanks, Brett. Your question seems like a short question. It's probably a very long answer if we really got into it. I would start by saying this, and then I'll open it up to the panel. I would start by saying that centralization and the use of technology in a different way does not equate to a less human approach or a less human connection. I think it's critical for us to maintain that connection with our clients, as we were talking about earlier. And I can't remember whose question it was initially. We've been able to do that remotely now for many months, and hopefully it hasn't suffered too much. And so, I think we would look for those same principles to move into the delivery of the new service. Our service excellence culture, which you've hopefully heard us talk about, and you will start to hear a lot more on in sort of the May-June timeframe, I think also is a component that really feeds to that, being here in the service of the organization and enabling the work of our institution, and that should help with that human connection as well. But I'll pause there. There's people that can speak more intelligently to it than I can, and I'm not sure who to direct it to, so I'll pause, and whoever jumps in first gets to go.
The only other thing I'll mention, Brett, that I think I can add to the conversation is we've actually talked about user experience a lot, and it's not just about efficient and effective process, it's about a positive user experience and changing the culture such that we're focused on customer service, recognizing that the voice of the customer is important. The satisfaction of the customer is critical and paramount. So one of the things that we are doing in the process design is that we will be engaging with user design experience, like user experience design experts, to make sure that we're taking that into consideration as we redesign processes and as we implement the technology, that we're considering that factor, because we're aware that we don't want it to be super quick and efficient, but have everybody feeling like it wasn't a positive and good experience for them. So we do recognize that, and we're working towards that in our process design work.
Yeah, if I could just to respond to what Todd had said in connection with it, isn't. I think in terms of, we've got to look at how we consume services, and in a bit of a case study, when we introduced the chatbot into the RO, I think it's over a year ago now, that allowed students to access services beyond the normal times that we were in the office, and also on weekends. And obviously at the beginning it wasn't as good as it grew into as we learned more. But all the time, and one of the great things about chatbots is that the analytics, you can get all the information you get in terms of what's going on. And we could see that it was being extremely successful in terms of providing an unmet need. So it isn't totally to your question, Brett, in terms of, like, obviously there has to be a personal side to it, but there's also the fact that there's an impersonal side which people want, because they just want an answer to a question, and they don't necessarily need a person to give it to them. They just want the answer. So I think, as Cheryl said, in terms of user design, we have to look at the holistic way people want to consume a service and be able to meet that on a broad basis. And that will include a personal element, there's no doubt. But I don't want to underplay the fact that people don't mind having access to a non-personal service if it does what they need it to do.
Thank you, Brian and Cheryl and Brett. I'll just thank Susan and Brett, our last two questions, because I happen to know that you're both on our SAT team, our staff advisory team. There may be others on the phone as well that fill those important roles. So if there are, thank you very much. I just happen to know both Brett and Susan are on there. Thank you very much. Let's go to Jenna, please.
Hi there, thank you so much. I'm a graphic designer in the Dean of Students office, and my question is in regards to internal communications, not only to communications to employees, but also marketing and communications to current students regarding student services and ways that they can get mental health support, etc. And I guess my question kind of has two parts. First of all, throughout this process, I haven't ever really seen internal communications or even communications addressed really. I am assuming that's falling under external engagement, but it's not always good to assume. So I just wanted to clarify, where does internal communications actually fall and how's that being addressed? And the other part of my question has been sort of touched on in the answer to Kathleen's question, and actually in just this question right before me, but it's in regards to how you probably know how design marketing and communications isn't just a simple transaction. It's a process, and there needs to be communication with our clients to figure out what their needs are so we can determine best tactics. And it's very much a back and forth. So if it is that we're falling under external engagement, I'm just nervous about being in a transaction processing hub because I have a lot of ideas about how that's going to cut us off from our clients. So it would be great to just get some clarification on how that process interaction is going to be maintained.
Yeah, thanks, Jenna. I'll take a run at this one. There may very well be transactions related to external relations, external engagement activities that do end up in shared services. But I think the type of work that you're talking about is probably more so relevant to either the service partner roles or the centers of expertise roles, which service not being the focus of today, but service partners being sort of that client-facing. Oftentimes it's still embedded with their clients' resources, and then the centers of expertise being those maybe more centralized, not sure the right words to use in your world, so I'll just use sort of policy strategy type roles that work for the entire organization. And the external relations, external engagement stream of work is, I think, the one that is actually sort of last in the queue right now. And so it's probably the one that we have the least detailed answers on, but hopefully that helps a bit. Thanks, Jenna.
Todd, if I can just make one comment in there too, you're absolutely right that it's one of the ones that's a little bit later on, but we do plan to have these Ask Set Anything events as well for those other streams. So there will be a specific Ask Set Anything event around external relations and more opportunity to answer those questions. We plan to have that a little bit further along when we are a little bit further along, so we can answer those questions as well.
Yeah, thanks, Rob, for that build. And so yeah, not only will we do that, we'll be repeating this one. Like we'll be doing the Ask Set Anything functional meetings on an ongoing basis. Yeah, thanks for that great build, Rob. I'm going to apologize, Lana or Alana. I'm not sure.
It's Alana
Okay.
Young. No worries. As long as you don't call me Lam, I'm okay. So my question kind of centers around employee experience and maybe a little bit around some of the stress and anxiety that staff have been feeling in this process. I myself, I did my undergraduate degree here at the U of A, and I've been working on campus now for 9 years across many different positions. And I love my job. I love everything I do. I am currently the director of discovery through the Faculty of Engineering. And I don't fit into a box. I'm sure we will be fitted into a box, but I'm sure there's a lot of folks on this call that feel very similarly. And I work with amazing people day in, day out across campus. And I guess my concern is, how are we going to ensure that we are retaining these top talent folks and we're ensuring that they are supported in this transition time? Because my worry is we're going to lose people to other institutions, in the city, across Canada, because we do have top talent here at the U of A, and that's why our programs have thrived over the years. And I'm worried with some of the ambiguity around some of the roles remaining in faculties and being centralized. We'll lose folks outside, and then we may lose some folks because they chose to stay in the faculty or program that they're in. And they saw some opportunities, but they didn't jump on them because they love what they do. They love who they work with, and they're worried about that change. So I'm just curious what kind of thought has been put into that, been put into that? Because I love the community that the U of A is, and I don't want to see that change. And I want to ensure that that is something that is at least in mind when moving forward in this process.
Yeah, thanks, Alana. I'll maybe put Rob and Annette on notice here to chime in just a second, but I would say this. I mean, let's be really clear. Nothing about this is easy when it comes to particularly when it comes to the people impact side. And so I just want to acknowledge that there are supports for people, and we try to publish those as often as possible so people are reminded that they have access to it. But I know that's not what you're asking me. You're asking me for certainty or direction in a world of ambiguity. And as I mentioned earlier, I too wish that I had all those answers. We don't, but we are really committed to making them available as soon as possible. We are very committed to working with people to help them, to the degree that we can within the parameters that we have, realize their career aspirations, their growth. I understand that there's maybe a belief out there that moving to this central model means somehow less of a career opportunity, less of an opportunity for growth. I'd actually be happy to chat with anybody that feels that way. I think it's actually the opposite. I think it actually opens up doors across a larger entity of the university, exposure to different things, different jobs, different opportunities that either didn't exist before or that in our highly decentralized world might not have been seen or been pursued. So I just have a different opinion on that. I think one of the practical things that we have employed is the POP, the position opportunity postings. And as soon as we're aware of things, that is one of the communication tools that we're going to use with people. Rob and team are fairly quickly going to be, moving out and meeting within faculties, with chairs in our departmentalized faculties, and starting to get some of this information a bit deeper, I'll say, into the organization. So hopefully all of those things help. But Rob and Annette, what would you add to that?
You've done a really good job of covering that, Todd. The one thing I would say is we do have to acknowledge this is a high anxiety period of time. We do recognize that staff are feeling that, and we do ask them to reach out for the different levels of support. I've worked for the university coming up 12 years, and I agree. I work in some great work environments. I absolutely love working for the University of Alberta. This is an awkward period of time, but I 100% believe that the new model, the new state, you will continue to be working with excellent people, be working in a great environment, and we can make sure that we create that environment, and it will be a desired employer into the future, as it has been in the past. I really believe we can make sure that does happen. Annette, anything else to add?
Sure, I'll just add a couple quick things because I know we're close on time, so I want to leave Todd time to wrap up. But what I would say is that I understand, I get it, and it is a confusing and concerning time for everyone, even involved as much as I am. There's lots of questions to be answered, and I think to Todd's point, we're trying to get communication out as quickly as we can, because I think that that's the best we can do, is tell you as much as we can as quickly as we can. So that's a key point. And the other thing is, as much as this is hard work and a lot of questions still to be answered for someone who's also been at the university quite a while, there is a lot of opportunity, because me and my colleagues have often said things like, why do we do this way? Or why do we have to continue to do it this way? So I think there's lots of opportunities to fix some of that, because I don't think we've looked at end-to-end process since I've been here at this magnitude. So I think that we'll have a lot more engaging work when we are done this process, but there's just a lot of work to get us there. So that's just what I'll add.
Thank you, Annette, Rob, Alana. Denise, we're going to give you the last question. I recognize we're already at our time, but Denise, let's run over by a couple of minutes and see what we can do for an answer for you.
Thank you. It's more of a clarity and a request, so maybe it will be short. You had mentioned earlier, and I'm sorry, but which is moving to Enterprise Square with the renovation down there?
I will call it shared services. So that would be the staff service center, transaction hub, the continuous improvement function that resides in there. There's also some other central functions, support functions. I don't know them all off the top of my list, but I think Rob's team is moving down there, for example.
Roughly how many people then are going to be now working downtown?
I'm not even sure that we know the answer to that right now, Denise, but it could be something that we could commit to get back to. Like I say, the plans are not finalized, but
yes. Okay. And my other request then is I go to the UAT, like the website, quite a bit and check on things just all the time to try to stay informed. Yes. And the one thing I'm looking at right now is the 2021 timeline underneath set program overview. And I'm wondering if we could request it to be updated, because some of the things that say that they're occurring are, 2 weeks away roughly. And it just makes me slightly nervous that I'm missing something if it's not. So it's just a request, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. I see some heads nodding on the team, and I see Rob writing notes. I know when Rob's head bends down to write a note that it will get done. So thank you for that. Thank you for that, Denise. And I'll maybe just take this opportunity to thank everyone for coming out this afternoon and sharing your honest feedback, your thoughtful questions. Before we end, I'd like to thank some of the people who helped make these events possible, and this one specific. So first, a big thanks to our panelists, Rob, Brian, Hamish, Cheryl, Annette, and Leanne. Thank you to Claire and Grant for helping us on the technical side of these events, and to Pam and Helen for being there with us today as our ASL interpreters. Thanks as well to the many members of the SET team who I know are working long, hard hours over the past weeks preparing for this event in and amongst everything else that's going on. Please do keep watching that UAT website, Denise and others, for our FAQ page on the UAT website, as we will be posting answers to questions that might have been submitted here that we didn't get to today. They'll be posted over the next week or so. And as I mentioned, we are working to schedule Ask Set Anything events for both the remaining streams, as Rob talked about, and we'll post those dates on the page as they're scheduled. And as I mentioned, we will be re-hosting sessions for shared services, as we will be for the other streams. So thanks again for coming out this afternoon. I wish everybody a great weekend. I think the weather's supposed to be nice. Stay safe, and we'll speak to you soon. Thank you.